Welcome to Sense Style. I'm Stuart. This is YSL Myself Eau de Parfum, and this is the pinnacle of the evolution of men's designer fragrances in the 21st century. It started with the Thierry Mugler Amen line that moved men's fragrances in a very sweet, gourmandy direction. In 2005, Dior came out with the Dior Homme line, which based a men's fragrance line completely around a floral note. That note was iris. This is a combination of those two elements. There's a ton of ambroxan, has an ambery sweetness here combined with a floral element, except it's not iris. It's orange blossom, a white floral, a traditionally female note. So you've got a sweet white floral making what is essentially a fragrance that a decade ago would definitely have been marketed to women. It would have been a white bottle instead of a dark blue one. And so men's fragrances have gotten more and more feminine over time. I certainly do understand why younger men are wearing it, because it is a compliment beast. A lot of young women love this DNA on men, so that I get. However, once you hit 35, 40, you start to become established. You start to grow up. You want to smell like a man. I have 8 modern, masculine classics for you guys to wear.
Bonner Bolton, also known as Luke Collins in The Longest Ride. Let's go.
Oh, no. Oh!
That was Bonner Bolton from Odessa, Texas. He's a professional bull rider. He was fine there. However, in 2016, he had a much more serious accident that got a lot of publicity. He was completely paralyzed for over 24 hours. It took him 3 days before he could walk again. And that incident got so much publicity that Tom Ford, a fellow Texan, decided to use him as the face for the re-release of his fragrance Ombre Leather. And he did that for a very good reason, because Ombre Leather is not a European leather scent like Tuscan leather. It's not a smooth, expensive suede jacket kind of leather. It's an American Southwest leather. So instead of suede jacket, think of saddles, think of chaps, think of desert heat, because that's where Tom Ford comes from. And who better to represent a fragrance like this than a bull rider? When you think that this is meant to embody rough around the edges leather, it's surprising that it was labeled unisex. However, men have definitely adopted it. At the year-end Fragrantica list, this is always on the top 20 or 30 greatest fragrances of all time for men. So yeah, it's essentially a male fragrance. And despite the fact that there is a jasmine note there, which is traditionally a feminine note, it is jasmine sambac, which has animalic facets in the same way that tuberose does. And it really just enhances the animalic feel of the leather. I think the amber does the same thing, because leather can have a slight sweet facet and amber just amplifies that. So when you hear people say that, they don't smell the amber or the jasmine and just smell leather, that really does make sense to me, because those are mostly amplifying notes that amplify the leather feel. It's considered to be like the quintessential leather scent out there at the moment. This is both masculine and modern. Next up, we have a different kind of masculinity. This is Chanel Allure Homme Sport Superleggera. And the name Superleggera has a real connection to the actual fragrance, even though it might not appear that way. Touring Superleggera was a coach building company from Milan in 1925, and they made very, very light vehicles. Superleggera means super light in Italian. However, all of their vehicles were also very sturdy as well. And so this particular fragrance was meant to be light but sturdy. And it's odd, but the sturdiness meant to be in contrast with some of the fragrances that they released in the past in the Allure Homme Sport line, because they felt that the sweetness, the tonka, had a powdery, soft feel to it. But instead of that, this has a sturdy amber note. So it's more like hard candy. So you've still got the sweetness, but they felt that tonka, and vanilla can be like that too. It can come across as powdery, come across as soft, come across as feminine. And Chanel catered to an older, more mature audience that are not as comfortable with the femininity in fragrances. And that's really where they were going with the addition of amber in the sweetness here. It also has an awful lot of musk as well, which is another masculine quality. The lightness comes from the grapefruit and the mandarin, the citrus, and the sturdiness, the masculine element, comes from the amber and the musks. And I gotta be honest, I did not want to like this fragrance at all. It took Chanel 6 years before they even considered another another men's fragrance. And so when this came out, I was like, I didn't want to hear about it. But since I've got this, I've sprayed this on my hand more times than I'd like to admit. I really do like what they're doing here. I was super mad at Olivier Polsch, but I think he really hit it out of the park. I think it's a wonderful way to keep the sweet aspect, the modernity of the sweet, without catering to the softness that can be embodied with vanilla or tonka. Fragrance number 3 is Hermès H24 Eau de Parfum, and this fragrance and this line did everything in their power to bring oak moss and clary sage back into relevance. And oak moss is a very old-fashioned note. It's been heavily regulated by IFRA, and so it's been almost completely removed from men's fragrances. However, they did use real oak moss here, but it's such tiny amounts that they're allowed. They created a dense, high-tech aroma chemical to really recapture and really enhance the little oak moss that they did have. They combined that with clary sage, another note that's often used in fougères and chypres, an old-fashioned style of fragrance, to give us this. Now, it's not entirely old school. It has been updated with the use of sclarine. That is another aroma chemical that is a dry, woody scent, but it also has metallic facets. And so this has metallic elements to go along with the oak moss and the sage and the rosewood. So it modernizes basically an old-fashioned, and I would say it's more of a chypre than a fougère. The inspiration for this was Christine Nagel. She's the perfumer. It was her father. He was a trouser tailor, and she wanted to capture what he did at his job. He would use a hot press on cloth. So the moss was the cloth, and the metallic elements in the sclarine was the hot press, the metal elements. Also, you're always cutting cloth as well. And so that's what she tried to capture. So I think the fragrance with the metallic components comes across as unique. I think it's got a freshness to it. I do think it suits summer and spring more than anything else. The performance is very, very solid for something that is relatively fresh. And so, yeah, there's no question that oak moss and clary sage are more masculine, but the metallic facets add a modern quality to it because metallic notes are relatively new in terms of aroma chemicals. Fragrance number 4 is brought to you by Creed Aventus. This is Cedrat Boise Intense, and I say that because the original Cedrat Boise came out in 2011, 1 year after Creed Aventus. It had considerable similarities, and a lot of people just said, oh, okay, it's a less expensive clone of Creed Aventus. Mancera did not like that at all. They have been accused in the past of making inspired by fragrances, although they do make a lot of originals. You look at something like Red Tobacco, which is kind of a phenomenon. That is definitely an original fragrance, and they did not like the comparison. I've looked into it, and it does appear that Mancera were creating a Cedrat Boise type of fragrance before even Creed Aventus. So when they released the Intense version, they wanted to make sure it was proven that they were doing something else, that they could do something else, and they moved Cedrat Boise in a very different direction, in a masculine direction with the use of leather and oud. How they pulled it off, I have no idea, because leather and oud are very animalic when put together, and you're talking about a fresh Aventus style fragrance, which Cedrat Boise was. So you're dealing with like citrus notes, black currant, there's a spicy element, but there's no question that this has an animalic quality underneath it. Definitely moves in a masculine direction, but it's still really pleasant. And I didn't realize how pleasant it was until very recently, and I did a short on this. I did a smell test. I took 12 of my favorite summer fragrances on a hot summer day to a park, and this fragrance won by a country mile. It's really hard to know what you really like until you smell something side by side, and I absolutely adored this. It wasn't close. It's a fantastic summer fragrance, and it's one of the few fragrances where the fragrance community loved it, and I had to try it, and I listened to them, and I love it. Fragrance number 5 is Acqua di Parma Colonia Leather. This is a 2019 fragrance, and with all of the popular, like high-quality leather fragrances on the market, I think this one comes closest to Tuscan leather in that it is a dark, smooth leather. It doesn't have the same amber elements that you get in something like Ombre leather. But this is also quite different in a lot of ways. For starters, Tuscan leather is dark, and frequently dark fragrances will have like a raspberry note. Raspberry is like a sharp, fruity note to separate it. And this has a raspberry note, but it's combined with orange and lemon. So it comes off as like a fruity piece. It takes it in a fruitier direction. Not a lot, just a hint of it. I don't pick up the floral aromatics in the mid, but I do pick up the Gaiac wood. The Gaiac wood is the game changer for me with this fragrance, because Gaiac wood is smoky and it adds an extra animalic component to a leather fragrance. So this is like Tuscan leather, but very rough around the edges. That Gaiac wood changes everything. It adds a smoky quality. And I would say this is probably the most animalic of all the high quality leather fragrances I've tried. I do find that the more I wear it, the more I like it, but it is something to get used to. This is not going to be for everybody. This is not a blind buy. But I do like it, and it's very powerful. This is like at least 8 to 10 hours in terms of performance. But yeah, modern 2019, definitely masculine. Fragrance number 6 is a totally unique masculine fragrance. It definitely is a classic. This is Costume National Scent Intense. This one's been around a little bit longer than some of the others, but this is a completely unique masculine ambery spicy fragrance that really works. Now, it is categorized as a floral fragrance because it has a lot of hibiscus and a lot of jasmine. There's no question there are more floral notes in this than anything else. But if you've ever smelled hibiscus, there is nothing feminine about that at all. It is a very, at least in terms of fragrances, a very spicy note, and there is a ton of hibiscus here. There's also an amber note in the base. Now, they've changed the note breakdown on Fragrantica. They're calling it ambergris, but I mean, I always felt it was an ambery quality. So even though it has the floral powderiness, it definitely has the amberiness. It definitely has the spiciness. There's also a tea note. It's very soothing. But what I love about this more than anything is its originality. It's a very distinct, original fragrance. And there's a reason, that it's still around and hasn't been discontinued for many years. And this is definitely one of the more popular fragrances at Costume National. Fragrance number 7 is Ombre Nomade by Louis Vuitton, and this is one of the nicest fragrances I've ever tried. This has perennially been in my top 10 ever since I tried it for the first time, and there is no question that this is a masculine fragrance. It is an oud base fragrance that has an extra layer of darkness to it. So you're going to get the standard oud triangle: oud, rose, and saffron. Now, it is a little bit heavier on the rose, but it has a key note on the side that's incense that takes the oud, which is dark, and moves it even darker. And whenever you're getting something that dark, you're going to need some raspberry. So it does have a little bit of a hint of raspberry, much in the same way that Tuscan leather does. But it smells like wealth. It smells like money. It's a 12-hour performance. It's heavy, heavy projection. It is a super masculine fragrance, but it is a super amazing fragrance. And a lot of times, because I do fragrance reviews, I will watch, when a bunch of influencers meet up in other countries, and they're always asked the same questions. One of them is, what's your favorite of all time? And it's almost always a different answer. However, the one fragrance that I see answered the most, I've seen it 3 or 4 times, is people say, Ombre Nomade. That is how high a level this fragrance is. It is at the top. Definitely masculine though. And finally, we have Dior Homme Parfum. This is the 2020 version, although it's very similar to the 2014 version. The 2025 went in a completely different direction, and this is my favorite fragrance of all time consistently. At least if you were to say to me, since I purchased this bottle, I had to get rid of all 320 of my fragrances except for one, every single time I would take this, despite the fact that you cannot wear this in any kind of warm weather at all. I wouldn't even wear this in the spring because it's fundamentally Dior Homme Intense, but with a lot more projection and a lot of leather. So it takes it in a very dark direction. It's a very complex scent. And I think the comparison with Dior Homme Intense makes it still modern. I mean, it came out in 2014, the original, but it is still modern when Dior Homme Intense consistently shows up as the top two fragrances of all time. Definitely in terms of fragcom, it is a relevant fragrance, and this definitely has a lot of similarities. It has a lot of iris. It has a little hint of oud in the base, but oud really just adds to the complexity of it. There's a lot of woods in this as well. It's got that lipsticky ambrette that goes with the iris. It's just amazing. But yeah, the performance is outstanding, like 12 hours. That's one of the reasons why you don't want to wear it in the heat. Anyway, if you watched this long, thank you very much. I just wanted to give people some masculine options that are not old school. A lot of the old school fragrances, I had a video on it recently. A lot of those fragrances have been reformulated, and they're not the same that they were when maybe you tried them in the 90s or the 80s. But these ones are masculine. They are modernized. They are all available, except for this one, unfortunately. This one has been discontinued. But yeah, I've just given you some options out there because, you know, once you hit 35, 40, you want to be a guy, you know? You don't want to have to succumb to all these trends. Anyway, thanks for watching.